The founding father of whiskey is not the kind of guy you'd want to grab a drink with. Mouthwash in the medieval times should remain where it came from, and chainsaws. Yeah, these are some truly terrifying and disgusting historic facts and feats, and make sure you stick around till the end because I've got news. James Jameson, heir to the Jameson whiskey empire, was, for lack of better words, a monster. Here's a fun fact sure to impress your friends the next time you're sitting on the front porch slowly sipping out of a clear crystal glass. In 1888, James Jameson embarked on an expedition to a trading post in the Belgian colony of Congo after he had been informed that the island was inhabited by a tribe of people who ate people. He was eager to witness the practice up close, and because his father raised him right, or incredibly wrong, he knew better than to show up empty-handed. Prior to setting sail, Jameson purchased a young woman for the sole purpose of offering her up to the tribe. When he arrived at the trading post, he handed the young woman over to the people who eat people and watched as they tied her to a tree and impaled her in the stomach twice before devouring her flesh. According to a Sudanese translator named Asad Farhan, while this happened, James Jameson sat back, relaxed, and drew sketches of the incident. Of course, the Jameson family did everything within their power to keep the incident from becoming a public scandal. In fact, they even enlisted the help of the Belgian government. But as we know, the truth always comes to light. Furthermore, when accused of the heinous act, Jameson never actually denied that it took place. Unfortunately, however, he died before facing any kind of real justice. For those of you who don't know, Genghis Khan was the founder and first Khan, or ruler, of the Mongol Empire. He also really liked to kill people. During his 21-year reign, it is believed that Genghis and his army claimed the lives of up to 40 million people. This initial ruthless reign is likely why his empire was able to cover nearly 1/4 of the Earth's surface in a span of just 125 years. But here's where things get crazy. Not only was Genghis Khan one of the greatest and most ruthless warriors of all time, but he was also one of the greatest activists. Kind of. Not on purpose though. Basically, because Genghis Khan killed so many people, many of which were peasants, there was no one left to farm the lands, and so those lands were eventually able to grow back into carbon-absorbing forests. In total, it is estimated that 700 metric tons of carbon was removed from the atmosphere as a result of Genghis Khan's 21-year reign alone, which is about equivalent to 1 year's worth of carbon dioxide generated per year through global petrol consumption, which is also scary, but not really what this video is about. So let's move on to something quite possibly even more horrific. In the 18th century, there was a woman named Mary Toft, and she was batshit crazy. One day, Mary Toft surprised her family by going into labor and shocked them even more by delivering something that looked far more like an animal than human, and that's because it was. In total, Toft reportedly gave birth to at least 9 rabbits. She had convinced doctors that this was due to the long discredited theory of maternal impression, a theory that states that emotional stimuli experienced by a pregnant woman could influence the development of offspring. One of her doctors even wrote to King George I informing him of the miraculous moment Mary Toft gave birth to 9 dead bunnies. Well, as it turned out, Mary Toft was not giving birth to any bunnies, shocker, but instead she was placing them you know where, in order to make the births look as realistic as possible. This was only discovered after one of the bunnies was dissected to reveal pieces of corn in the animal's stomach, which of course proved that it had not in fact developed inside of the crazy woman's womb. The whole thing is not only terrifying, but mortifying, but if I had to learn about it, you have to too. Sorry. Moving swiftly on from that absolute horror story, let's talk about another person from history with some less than savory habits and morals. Peter Stumpp, a German farmer and killer who lived in the mid to late 1500s. Throughout his life, Stumpp was accused of werewolfery, witchcraft, and human consumption. Likely because he did just that. In the span of just 25 years, Peter Stumpp claimed the lives of 16 individuals. When he was finally caught, he admitted to killing and drinking the BLOOD of locals, as well as consuming a few. He also admitted to having eaten a part of his son's brain. He claimed that the reason for his rampage was that he had been a victim of the devil, although it's much more likely that he was just a complete and utter madman. In 1589, Stumpp was convicted of killing and consuming villagers, as well as partaking in some less than savory adult acts with certain members of the community. He was sentenced to death by wheel, flesh was torn from his body, and his limbs were broken before his head was ultimately removed from his body too. His daughter and his mistress, believed to have been involved in Stumpp's crimes one way or another, were killed alongside of him. This next point is no less horrific than the last, so just keep that in mind as I walk you through the invention of the chainsaw. In 1785, two Scottish doctors, John Aitken and James Jeffrey, invented the Aitken's flexible chainsaw, a tool made with a fine serrated link chain with teardrop-shaped handles on both ends. Why? Well, for childbirth, of course. No, I'm not kidding. The cutting device was created as a unique surgical tool used to cut through the pelvises of delivering mothers who were having trouble pushing during the birthing process. And after the Atkins chainsaw came the giggly twisted wire saw, which was similar to the Atkins saw, but it had T-handles for easier grip. In 1830, orthopedic technician turned orthopedic surgeon Bernard Hine invented the first hand crank chainsaw, which was, thank God, not used to cut through the pelvic bone of women already in extreme pain, but it was used to cut into patients' skulls. Now, as truly terrifying as these inventions sound, they did pave the way for the much more humane medical practices we see today, so I mean, I guess that's a win. Kinda. Peter Niers was quite a notorious criminal back in the Middle Ages, and that's because Niels controlled a gang of criminals who, combined, were apparently responsible for killing 544 innocent people. He was finally arrested in 1577, which is when he confessed to personally killing 75 out of the 544, and to having learned the art of invisibility, which, according to him, is why he evaded capture for so long. In 1577, he escaped. But he was recaptured in 1581 because, according to him, he had been separated from the magical materials he needed to make himself invisible. It was also at this time that he admitted to the remaining 469 killings and proclaimed his love for the devil, and also noted that all of his crimes had been committed for black magic purposes. For this, he was sentenced to death, but not just any death. One of the most brutal deaths in all of history. Peter's death began with torment, and it lasted 3 days total. On the first day, pincers were used to strip the skin from his entire body, after which hot oil was poured onto the wounds. On the second day, his hands and feet were covered with hot oil and then held over hot coals until they became reduced to nothing but bones. And on the third day, he got the wheel. He was tied naked and face up by his hands and feet to 4 wooden stakes coming out of the ground. A large iron-rimmed wheel was then slammed down on his arms and legs a total of 42 times, shattering the bone from his hands to his shoulders and his feet to his hips. This sounds a bit like a children's song, but it's way too dark for that. His remaining limbs were then hacked off, all while he was still alive. The man truly did live and die like a monster. Did you know that in the 18th century, before the age of precision, resin, and porcelain manipulation, dentures were made from real human teeth? If you didn't, now you do. In fact, in the Netherlands, the teeth of thousands of soldiers who perished in the Battle of Waterloo were used to replace the teeth of wealthy citizens whose own teeth had begun to rot due to poor oral hygiene. The teeth were stolen by looters, who would sell them to dental techs, who would boil them, then carve them, then shape them into dentures, and then sell them to the rich people for an incredible profit. So, just keep that in mind the next time you feel like skipping your nightly brushing routine. And keep this in mind the next time you want to read an old book, specifically ones bound in the 18th and 19th century. Why? Well, because in a process known as anthropodermic bibliophagy, some books bound back then were bound in human skin. Luckily, there are only about 18 confirmed cases of these skinned books, so it's unlikely you'll come into contact with one. If you do, though, you should know the subject matter is generally either anatomy or erotica, which makes the whole thing just that much more creepy. Moving on to the acid bath killer, also known as John George Haigh, a British killer who killed and died in the 1940s. This guy was a family man with a fondness for playing the piano and classical music. Of course, all of that changed when his marriage ended the exact same year it began. That same year, 1934, John was sent to jail for fraud. After his release, he immediately began defrauding people once again, and once again he found himself in jail. It was then that John came to the conclusion that the reason he had gotten caught was because he had left the people he defrauded alive. This is also when he began looking into the relationship between human bodies and sulfuric acid. He was released from jail for the second time in 1943, which is also when he took the life of his first victim, his former boss William McSwan, who he smacked over the head with a lead pipe before placing his body in a 40 imperial gallon drum with concentrated acid. 2 days later, McSwan's body was no more. John repeated the process with at least 5 other people, although he claims he killed a total of 9 people throughout his criminal career. He was eventually captured in 1949 after one of his victims' friends reported them missing and police went investigating. After the arrest, John said to one of the officers, "If I told you the truth, you would not believe me. It's too fantastic to believe." He was executed that same year. And finally, did you know that the ancient Romans used to use their own urine as mouthwash? Because I didn't until recently, of course. Was I pleased to learn this information? No. Was I surprised? Also no. Honestly, you guys, history is nasty. But here's the question. Were the Romans absolutely crazy people who enjoyed the taste of urine, or was there actually a scientific reason to why they did what they did? The answer is the latter. You see, urine contains ammonia, which is technically a cleansing agent, so it's entirely possible that the use of urine as mouthwash did make the Romans' teeth whiter. But at what cost? They also used urine to clean stains out of clothes, which is less gross, but still gross. Honestly, all I have to say is thank God for modern cleaning products and cool mint mouthwash. Am I right? Alright, you guys, that's the video for today. As I mentioned, I do have an announcement to make, and that is that this was my last video with Most Amazing Top 10. I want to thank you all so much for all of the support and love you've shown to me and my videos. If you want to stay updated with me and what I'm doing, you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram. Username is in the bio of this video and all the other videos I'm in on this channel. I've been your host, Hannah Thompson. It's been an absolute pleasure making content for all of you this past year. And for the very last time, cheers, friends.